Fala pessoal do Sharpcast, sejam muito bem-vindos ao nosso 13º episódio. Mais uma vez eu e o Divinão aqui, estamos reunidos para um papo bem legal com o nosso convidado. Mas antes de começar, uma atenção especial para o nosso patrocinador, que é a BetBra. Para quem não conhece, a BetBra é um e-book que funciona como espelho da Pinnacle e também é uma exchange que funciona como espelho da Betfair. Ela que é 2 em 1. Então, além de ter uma interface que ela é muito fácil de mexer, bem amigável, você terá acesso a diversas funcionalidades bem legais que você não encontra em outros lugares, né, Divinão?
É isso aí, a gente já utiliza ela bastante aqui na Bifront há muito tempo, e agora tá aí com a gente no Sharpcast, né? Você tem várias funcionalidades para você fazer, e a mais interessante aí que eles lançaram há pouco tempo é o planejamento automático das suas entradas de tudo que você pega lá na BetBra ou na Exchange. Tudo que você pega já é lançado ali diretamente, você já tem uma noção de profit real, como você está. Além disso, você pode depositar via Pix, via cripto também, que é muito bacana para a gente que mexe nesse mercado, né? Além de poder programar uma odd que você deseja pegar no live, qualquer coisa nesse sentido também. É só vantagem até aqui, viu?
Show de bola. Então, se você ficou interessado, quer conhecer a BetBra, é só escanear aqui o QR Code que vai estar aparecendo em algum lugar aqui na tela, muito provavelmente para cá. Ou clicar no link aqui da descrição, que a gente vai deixar aqui para vocês clicarem e vai ser direcionado diretamente para lá. Fechou?
Já que fizemos nosso merchan, bora chamar nosso convidado do dia, o Steven Diano, que é uma das lendas das apostas, especialista em networking, e está em contato com diversos grupos ao redor do mundo, já trabalhou com alguns dos maiores nomes da aposta nos Estados Unidos. Vamos puxar tudo dele aqui hoje. Hey Steven, say hello for our public and say your start. How did you get started in betting world?
Well, hello to everybody, and thank you for having me. I always had an interest in sports as a kid, and I liked watching football and NFL, and I was always a big fan. And I had a neighbor who, I guess was in his 20s at the time, and when I was still in high school, and I used to go over and hang out with him, and I would see him betting on various sports. He would call and make some bets, and I thought that was interesting. And so then one day I said, "Hey, could you bet this stuff for me?" And he's like, "No, I'm not getting involved in that because you're too young or whatever." But turned out, and a friend of mine in high school, his father was a bookie, and so he would take bets from all his son's friends, and small $5 bets. But if you bet $5, you were laying 6 to 5. And then if you bet up to 30, then you could lay 11 to 10. But otherwise, you were laying 6 to 5. But when you're that young, you're just starting 6 to 5. That was big money back then. And so I just kind of took an interest in that. And then I was one day in high school, I happened to see a teacher's pool sitting on my French teacher's desk. And it was just, 20 games, pick the winners on the weekend. And as I was walking out the door, I said, "Oh, make sure you take so-and-so this week." And so she says, "Well, who else should I take?" So I picked the whole pool for her, and she ended up winning that week. And she made like, I don't know, she tipped me like $10 or $20 or something. And then she had me picking her pool every week. And there was a physics teacher who was the one who was running this. And I made some kind of comment about the teacher's pool, and he says, "Well, how do you know about it?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I was helping this other teacher with their picks." The next week, when I went to go to the teacher, she says, "I'm not allowed to use you for the picks anymore." So I got banned real early.
Yeah, it's
But
really
that
early.
was early start in sports betting to just get a feel for it. And then as time went on, then I learned about the concept of maybe of middling, where, you get two different bookies and find differences in lines. And so that was my next goal, was that now that I had my high school friend's dad as a bookie, now I was trying to find somebody else. And I ended up finding this guy, I think his name was Lenny or something like that. And it was NCAA basketball tournament, and I would get the line from him, and he had like different numbers, and so I cleared it with my one guy, my stepson or my friend's father. I said, look, can I bet like $100 or $200? Because I'm just betting the other side, so it's only going to be, I'm not really losing that much. And he said, sure. And so he was going to take it, and I bet the 200 with the other guy. Well, anyway, so I hit my first middle or two, and then next thing I know, I learned a valuable lesson that the one guy, the new guy, wasn't very honorable, so he wasn't really paying. So maybe I played like maybe attempted like 4 or 5 middles, and I hit one, and then the other 4 games, they didn't split evenly, and I won more from the new guy and lost to the guy I know. So now I had to collect from the new guy, and the new guy wasn't paying too quick. So that was a problem. So now I owed my regular guys some money, and eventually I tracked this guy down. That he was working at a deli, behind the counter at a deli, and I went down to the deli. And I'm a high school kid. I went down to the deli and I made a scene down there. And I got the guy to pay me, because I wasn't putting up with that. But I learned a valuable lesson early, that you have to be real careful if you're trying to go both ways, because if you got a guy that's dealing you real shaky numbers, you don't want to be betting the other side with somebody who's solid, because the shaky guy is eventually not going to pay you. So, lesson learned there.
Yes, it's kind of the new soft books that appears all around the world that don't pay the winners one too. It's kind of a lesson that you learned before, right?
Yeah, well, they don't, because they're just taking a shot, assuming people are going to lose, and then when somebody wins, they don't know what to do. The concept of paying never crossed their mind. So then that's where you run into an issue. Also, when you have a guy like that who's dealing real weak numbers, as a general rule, instead of trying to middle, you should just bet that guy. Because what invariably happens is, if you're trying to middle, let's say that this guy has a limit of $10,000 he's going to lose to you. And after 10,000, that's it. He's going to say, forget it. You can't, I'm not doing this anymore. So if you strictly play middles with the guy, I mean, you may hit some middles, and in the process of winning that 10,000 from him, you may make a profit of $5,000. But basically, the 10,000 you would have got from him, you gave 5,000 to somebody else. That's basically what you did. So in the case of a guy who's going to deal you weak lines, you should never middle off of him. You should always just bet the guy. And if the guy doesn't pay you, at least you're not out of pocket to go pay somebody else. At least you just got stiff. And eventually the guy's going to say, no mas. And, at least you've got your max value out of the guy.
Okay.
And Steven, talking a little bit about how to make money with betting. When you start back then, what was your process to find an edge, to find value to place your bets and stuff like that?
Well, when I first started out, I mean, so this was, in high school. Now I'm getting to the end of high school. I'm getting into college. And I'm still hooked on the concept of trying to find different bookmakers and middle and stuff like that. And I had this idea to, I had gone to Vegas. I had done a baseball trip with a friend of mine where we drove around the country and saw a game in every ballpark. And during the All-Star break, we went to Las Vegas for 2 days. And I knew somebody who knew somebody there who got me set up with a room. And the guy was the manager of the sports book. And I was talking to him. And he was showing me, how you can get all kinds of different numbers and be able to middle out there. And so I had this great idea that, because now I was old enough, that the next college basketball season, I was going to go out to Vegas for 3 months, and I was going to try to middle college basketball. And so I went out there in early December. I found an apartment, put down a deposit on it for 3-month rental, and then drove out there in January. And right before I went out there, there was somebody that I was dealing with in the Philadelphia area who had, I guess, people that were making bets for him out in Vegas, but they were having some issues with one of the guys. And they said, well, if you want to do anything for us out there, let us know. We could probably use you. So when I got out there, I investigated what that opportunity was, and I made probably the greatest decision I ever made in my life. And I decided, instead of trying to do what I was going to do, I said, let me just work for these guys. I'll make a little extra money, and maybe I'll learn a little bit more about what's going on in town and how things work out. Well, in retrospect, had I done my original plan and not done that, I probably would have busted out and ended up back in Philly, and I don't know where my career would have taken me. But because I really didn't go there with a large bankroll, I had less than $10,000, and my plan was to bet in casinos where I had to put the money up front, and then bet with bookmakers back east. And in retrospect, there would have been no way to keep moving the money back and forth to keep me in any kind of sustainable situation. So I ended up starting to work for these guys, and I worked for them through the entire college, through the entire college basketball season as a runner. And I was making
Was the NCAA, this one?
What's that?
It was the NCAA, the college.
Yeah, that's what
basketball.
season it was. It was just college basketball. It was in January. And so it was college basketball and, pro basketball too. And so I was getting like 500 hours a week to bet for them. And the guy who was in charge out there, who was the main guy, he really didn't like doing it anymore. And he didn't want to do it after NC basketball tournament was over. And so the guy who was the money behind it back in Philly, who I've referred to as the businessman in some of my podcasts, he decided to put me in charge of the Vegas runners. And so I got a bump in pay. Now I was in charge of the runners. And then once I was in charge of the runners, after having been a runner, I had, I would distribute the money and collect it from the other runners every day. And then eventually I went into an office, and I was the one that was running the other runners around, telling them where to go and not to go and stuff like that. And I mean, it was like second nature to me to be able to do that. The amount of money that we were making, like that, the first couple of months compared to once I took over, and especially once I got into an office situation where I was in the office running them, we just went to like a whole nother level of efficiency, and we were just killing it. And so I progressed from there, and that was how I kind of started to build my name up in the business. And so I had a reputation as well, they referred to us as the Philly crew because we were from Philadelphia originally, and that's how we were known in Vegas.
So that was that. Let me think. It's when you realize that your focus should be on the art of betting, let's put it this way, rather than the science of creating prices, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody always likes to, handicap or say, look at two games and say, oh, well, I like this or I like that. Like, take the Super Bowl. I mean, everybody's got an opinion of who they like in the Super Bowl or why. But it's, when it comes down to, like a college basketball slate like today where there's like 40 or 50 games, I mean, to sit there and, there might be one game that's on TV that you have an opinion or you really like because you watched the team play a week before. But when it comes down to actually handicapping and making numbers on all those games, there's a lot of work and a lot involved. And what I ended up specializing in was figuring out the best way to get down the money and get the best prices, and maybe know when to buy maybe a half a point, when to maybe bet a money line versus a straight lay the points, or vice versa. And so I kind of picked up on all those skills. And what I found out over the years, which is something that most people don't realize, is that handicappers, there's a huge difference between handicappers and bettors. And most handicappers can have kind of the best information in the world, but if they had to be in charge of betting their own games, they wouldn't do nearly as well as if they have somebody else that does the betting for them. And a lot of the reason is they don't always have the discipline to wait for the right number. In a lot of cases, they get married to certain teams where if I'm doing the betting and I can see that there's opposition to something, instead of saying, well, that was my game and I like it, I'm still going to bet it anyway, I'll sit back and kind of reevaluate it more. There's certain situations where, like, let's say you got a team like Dallas or Buffalo or Kansas City or San Francisco that's maybe a 10-point favorite, at home on a Sunday afternoon or something like that. A lot of times, let's say you might like the dog in that game, but a lot of times there's no reason to bet that dog early because the public is going to come in on the favorite almost always. And you'll get maybe 10.5, 11, sometimes 11.5, depending upon, how much the favorite, the public likes them. So you have to recognize spots like that and take advantage of those spots. Now, there's times when you're wrong, obviously, and maybe and you should have bet it, but more often than not, you're going to make a decision that's going to be beneficial to the handicapper as opposed to hurting him.
Yes, and the biggest difficulty that we passed through a few months ago, and it's always a difficult too, is to put the money on the market, to have liquidity to stake, and things like that. The handicapping, it's only the one part of the process, The biggest difficulty we have here on our company is to stake it, to have liquidity to do it, and to receive from the books too, this kind of things.
Are you talking about being limited by the books if you're winning? Yeah, that's a serious problem here, and something that I've been really one of my missions on Twitter is to point out all these discrepancies and issues that these places have. And basically what they've done is when the US decided to open up the sports gambling, I was like, wow, this is great. Now you can go to any state, you'll be able to bet. This will be regulated by the state. And I never dreamed like all these places were gonna, like these big companies were gonna let you bet and then say, all right, we think you're too sharp, so we're gonna cut you down to like $50 a game or something like that. I mean, these multi-million-dollar companies like DraftKings and FanDuel, and so what these companies have done is they've forced people to go back to the offshore market and the private bookmaker, and that's where you really those are the only places that will give you a set limit, whether it's 500, 1,000 a game, and you bet and you win, you get paid, and you lose, you pay, and that's nice and simple. Whereas here, these places, if you win too much, then they'll even slow pay you. They'll cut your limits down. I had two places. The one that closed my account, and I hadn't even bet in there and didn't even know it was closed because I had stopped betting in there when they cut my limits and never took my money out. And then this was like in January. And then when football season started, I went in to see what maybe if I could get bigger limits again in football. And I go in and there's a note that says your account has been closed. Please contact customer service. And we're talking, I had like 30,000 in the account, and so I get in touch with them and I said, all right, well, what are we going to do? And they kept stringing me along. It took me about a month to finally get them to send me my money, even though they closed the account. I mean, you would think that if they're going to close the account, the first thing they should do is send you a notice saying, we've decided to close your account. What would you like us to do with your funds? Not, we closed your account. Well, we hope you never notice it. In the meanwhile, we're using your money to run our business. So, and I've had trouble collecting from another place too. But so in general, there's very few places. Oh, excuse me. There's very few places now that you can really bet in this market until something gets done. And I'm not asking for something big. I mean, I'd be happy if, DraftKings and FanDuel, if they just took nickels and dimes, which they clearly should be able to afford to do because they spend like millions and millions in advertising. If they just took a quarter of their advertising budget and said, we're going to use this as our bankroll to book just nickels and dimes from anybody, they would still make money because there's still, for all the sharp people, there's still going to be enough square people that are going to counteract that. So why they shouldn't care if they think you're sharp, they shouldn't even try to figure out who's sharp and who's not. They should take a bet, move the line a half a point, or take a bet, move the line a whole point, and then leave it up there, let somebody else bet. And then if they bet the other way, you move it back. You move it back and forth and back and forth. The old Stardust when it was run by Scotty Scheffler, they used to take college basketball. They used to take 2 dimes. They used to take 500 hours on a total. And you make your bet. You bet your 2 dimes. They move the line. You bet the other side. they move it back. You bet again, they move it back and forth, back and forth. Same thing with a total. There was a guy named Jack Lysat who, and he manages a book down in Costa Rica now. And he used to have a system like when the college basketball would come up on Saturday and they'd put it up on Friday night. And he would start all the games off at like a $500 limit. And then as soon as he took a bet for 500, then the limit on that game would go to 1,000. Then if he took another bet, then the limit on that game would go to 1,500. So he would progress the limit up as he was taking action to move and straighten the line. So there's all different kinds of ways to move the line and do it responsibly instead of just trying to spend all your money just trying to target suckers. And I mean, I don't even know how I guess they're making money, but I don't understand that you can spend the money that they're spending with the celebrities that they're using, the amount of money they have to be paying them, and they're targeting the people that want to bet $10 and $20 parlays, which is a lucrative market to book. But I mean, you're not getting any. You're getting it a little bit at a time. That's a lot of volume you got to make. So that's my opinion on that. But they're driving people back to the offshore market.
Yes, because they probably could use the winners, let's say like that, to handicap the lines. When as you said, when the money enter there, they increase liquidity to put the other side, and they could keep doing it until the game starts.
That's exactly what that's what the big books like Pinnacle and Sports 411 and
the Asian market in general, I guess,
and Circus Sports in Las Vegas, and they do the same thing. And there's certain players that they take a limit bet and they'll move the line a little more than they might move it from just some regular guy that's got a small account.
Yeah,
so
they can profile the accounts too.
Right, which is fine. They can do that. Now they're moving the line based on somebody sharp, and now if that draws action to the other side, that's okay because they're on the side they want to be on now. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to work. But you can't explain that to these corporations.
Yeah, it's hard to. We are passing through here in Brazil the regulation process too. I don't know how it would be on the future, but for now it's kind of okay until now.
And Steven, what do you do to solve this kind of problem, like the limitation and stuff like that the bookies do? Do you use some kind of strategy or something like that?
I mean, if I get limited, I get limited. I just go find another guy to bet with. You're just constantly always trying to find new places to bet, and or maybe other people that have places to bet that can help you get down, where you just call them up and say, "Hey, I'm looking to bet this. Can you get me a little bit on it?" And you find other people and you network out. And I mean, those are the only ways until some of these U.S. places decide to take a bet. I mean, hopefully one day Circa will get to Michigan, and then at least I'll have one good book I can bet locally.
Nice.
Okay.
Again, we have the power of the networking, right?
Yeah, networking is big. I mean, most big syndicates will network, down at some point. They'll have their stuff that they want to bet, and then they'll have a bunch of guys that they'll call and say, "All right, this is what we're looking for. Help me with this or help me with that." So, I mean, I'll get involved with some of them that I know that are some of those that I know that are pretty good. They've come to me and they've asked me to help, and so I'll work out with them, and I'm always happy to help long as I know that it's a winning product that they're betting, I'm always happy to help them bet it. And then I'll just keep a little for myself, give them some. And it's a win-win for everybody.
Nice. And sometimes we don't realize how important is this kind of thing, the networking. And in your point of view, what do you think? What is the importance of this networking? What kind of thing this can for good reason for bettors and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, the networking is important. It's really a function of how much you need to bet. If you're just, trying to bet between, 500 and 1,000 or two, you probably don't need to be networking or have a network set. But if you're trying to get down, 5 to 10,000 every time you want to bet something, then you're probably going to need help, especially if you want to get down and, not flood the market or cause the market to have a big move or anything like that by not betting any of the big places. Or if you don't care, if you're just betting that's another thing too. If you're just betting your own stuff and you really don't care, then you can bet. Just go right in and bet the big places like the Chris's or the Pinnacles or Circus, and just the line moves. If it moves back, if it stays moved, then you probably know you were betting something good. If it comes back and it's still there after you bet those places, then maybe your bet, you kind of know your bet maybe isn't as good. So I'll work with those. I have a couple of handicappers that I have that give me stuff that they tell me what they like, and then I make the decision on a daily basis if I'm going to play it or not play it based on any other information I can gather. So, but specifically, I don't do the handicapping myself, but I'll ask the right questions about a lot of stuff. Like I'll find out on certain things why they like something, and because sometimes they'll like something. For example, a lot of handicappers, they just crunch numbers and they come up with plays, which is fine. That's a great way. But a lot of times when you do that, there's information that sometimes is out there that's not in your number. You don't have. Now, we had another guy used to handicap for our group. His name was Seal, and he still handicaps to this day. And what he does is he goes on the internet, scours the internet, and reads articles about every team every day. And it's all he does is read. And he looks for something that might be bettable. I mean, he could read for 3 hours, and if he finds one play, then that was worth it. And the type of things that he might find when he's reading is, let's say, for example, in college basketball, sometimes you'll come across a coach that's playing a certain team, and he says, you know what? Yeah, I know these guys like to run and gun, and we like to run too, but we don't think we can run with these guys. So we're going to try and play a steady full court offense and use our full shot clock and go play a possession to possession game. Well, a game like that where you normally like to run with other teams and both teams run, you're going to have a high total. But if one coach says, I'm going to try and make this a possession by possession game, that's going to slow the game down a lot. That would make that a good play for the under. A lot of times you might have a coach go the other way and say, you know what, I'm just going to let everybody loose. We're just going to keep running and push the pace constantly the whole game. And that's a spot where you might want to play over. And a lot of times when like a situation like that, if that works, you want to probably bet it. You could probably get like 2 or 3 bets out of it before the odds makers catch up to the fact that the coach changed his strategy around a little bit. So those are the kind of things that you look for in reading articles. Sometimes you'll get wind of maybe a player that got hurt that didn't make the news or something like that every now and then. And various other, things. There's weather's another factor that you can get if you have somebody who's pretty good with weather and can project it out far in advance. That can be helpful for football as well. So, there's the other factors outside of straight handicapping that can affect the game too. And so now stuff like that, I don't have to be a handicapper for stuff like that. If I come across a piece of information like that, I don't need to, check with a handicapper. Would you make the game? I'll just assume that whatever the line is out there, the market line is the right line. And if it's a piece of information that's clearly not in the line, then I assume there's an edge regardless of what the handicapper might have made the game. And so that's a question of you just, that's like called no-brainer handicapping. Like if LeBron James is out, you don't have to handicap the game and say, well, what should the line be without him? It's going to move 4 or 5 points. You just bet, which would be one of my sayings I like to say is bet first and ask questions later. And in a case like that applies, but that also I apply that to handicapping. And for those that are out there that are that do their own handicapping, and maybe let's say you come up with a new model and now you're ready, you've grinded all your numbers, and now you think you're ready to bet. A lot of people will sit there and they'll say, okay, well, if I was going to bet, this is what I'd bet today. And they'll write down all these fake paper bets without actually making them. And they'll see how they do. And then they'll do it the next day and the next day. And then if they're winning after a certain period of time, then they'll jump in and start betting. Okay. I disagree with that strategy. My strategy is bet first and ask questions later. So I say if you got a model like that, bet it right out of the gate. Once you've got your numbers, bet it right out of the gate. Don't go crazy and bet it for millions, but bet it for something. And the reason I say that is a couple of reasons. Number one, if you're right, then you're going to be taking advantage of your information right out of the gate from the start. So you're in good shape. The other thing is, if you're right and you're not betting it, by the time you jump in, you may have come on to something that the handicappers might catch, the odds makers might catch up with. And then after a week or two, maybe your model's not as good as it was when you started. So you had all that winning out of the gate, but now it's been adjusted and now it's not as good. So you would have lost out on all that winning again and then be just in a mediocre situation. And the third situation is if it's not winning right off the bat, then that's going to motivate you that much more to figure out why. And that will keep you going. So for all three of those reasons, I say bet first, ask questions later.
Good. Um, we want to ask you something now that everyone likes to ask for you. How was the experience of working with some of the largest betting groups, especially with Billy Walters?
Well, Billy, I only worked with Billy for 1 year, but he was the last piece of the puzzle. I worked for my one crew for all the years I was doing it, and then my crew was kind of in a situation where the guy, the businessman I was working with, had partnered with somebody else, and then they were looking to split up, and then they decided they didn't really want the expense of having people in Vegas because the climate wasn't as good as it used to be years ago. So they were going to split up, and Billy heard that knew of this and said, "Well, Fats, why don't you come work for me this year?" So I went to work for Billy, and I kind of got a good glimpse into what he does and how he operates. And to me, that was like the final piece of my puzzle or of education. And then the following year, I was going to work for him again, and we couldn't make a. I wanted to work for the same deal that I had the year before. I was more than happy, and he wanted to give me a deal that was slightly less. Now, the deal he was offering me wasn't unfair, and the deal that I originally had to go over there was kind of a little bit of a sweetheart deal. It was the bonus situation of my deal was a little higher than what it would normally be in most cases, and but I felt I did good work, and I didn't want to do it for less, and he wanted to lessen it, and I said, then let's just part friends and we'll each go on. And then I went on my own, betting my own money, doing my own thing, just going around. And once I did that, one of the things that I would do is I started out probably when I went on my own, I probably started out with a max bet of around 2,000. But sometimes you might go into a casino, let's say, and there's a football game and they got an 8, and the line's pretty much 7 everywhere in town, and it's good for 5 dimes. Well, I'm only looking to bet 2,000, but the way my DNA was wired, I can't just sit there and bet 2,000 and let them move the line when it's good for 5. I have to bet it for. I'm incapable of not betting it for 5, even though I only want 2. So what I would do was I would bet it for the 5. Now I had an extra 3 dimes of +8 on a game that's 7 everywhere. So I would call other top guys of crews and stuff like that, and sharp guys that I had been in contact with over the years, and say, hey, look, I was betting this game. I got an extra money on it at +8. Do you want any? And you give this guy a nickel, and you give this guy a nickel, and you give this guy a dime, and this guy a nickel, and this guy a nickel. Next thing you gave away, take that extra 3,000 and give it away 4 or 5 pieces to 4 or 5 people who are like, wow, that's a great bet. That's like stealing. I love that. So, they would, if they could bet it, they'd bet 10,000 at that number. So I gave out all these little trinkets from time to time wherever I could. And then in return, I would get information back on other stuff, and that helped support my rise as doing this on my own. I slowly built up my bankroll, and still around today.
Nice. And still talking about partnership and stuff like that. What attributes do you consider important in a partner? when you are choosing one or looking for one?
Well, I've had several. I mean, there's all different types of partnerships. Now, I used to have a guy. There was a guy that I had that I knew, and when in the heat of football season in Vegas, there's no such thing as enough money to bet football because all the games are Saturday and Sunday, and you're betting Monday, you're betting Tuesday, you're betting Wednesday. By the time Thursday or Friday rolls around, you don't have any money left to bet, but there's still, Friday and Saturday, there's still going to be stuff to bet. So what I used to do, I had a guy, if I was running low on the weekend, I would borrow anywhere between $100,000 and $150,000 from him every Thursday or Friday. And then I would pay him back on Monday after the games were over. What I would do, I had one guy used to only charge me, would do it sometimes charge me $500 for the weekend for that, which I guess if you do the math, compounded interest, that's actually probably a high rate for, a weekend for that much money. But when you combine it, over a year, but for the value I was getting out of that money, it was worth it. And then another guy who I got to do it, instead of paying him for the money, I would give him pieces of a lot of the bets that I made. Like anything I bet that was really, really good stuff, like the stuff where I took 8 when a game was 7, or I took 3.5 where a game's going down to 2.5. And I would give him, dime here, nickel here, dime here. And I'd give him this little card of games, and he was putting his own money up. But, maybe give him a list of 10 or 15 games that I bet at all great numbers that I bet with his money. And then he would just root that in, and he always made way more than the nickel on. He would win every week with that. So he couldn't wait to lend me the money the following weekend every week. So I mean, that's one partnership, and that guy over the years, anytime I've had an idea or I needed something or I wanted it, he was always, hey, you think this is going to work out? I'll put the money up. Let's just go do it. Let's make some money. And I've been partners with him over the years on many different projects or things. Now, other types of partnerships which I think is what you're referring to, are called are like betting partnerships. And the way those work, and this is where it comes into a guy like Spanky or Chinese Mike. What they do is, let's say I have a couple of bookmakers that I have accounts with. Well, I'll give those accounts to them, and they'll bet them for me. They have a whole office staff that bets, and they'll bet those accounts for me. And then if they win, we split the accounts 50-50. So if they win, they get half the money, I get half the money. If they lose, they pay half the money, and I pay half the money. And basically, so I'm giving them the accounts to bet with, and then they do all the betting for me. So that's another type of partnership. Now, I have people that give me accounts and I bet them, and then, we chop them up 50-50. They expect, I win. They always end up winning in the long run. Some seasons have been slower than others, but in the long run, every betting partnership I've had, they've made money. And Spanky and his group, they pretty much do the same type of deal. And it doesn't have to be 50-50. It could be 60-40. It could be 70-30. It could be 80-20. You can decide what percentage you want to risk, and I'll take the rest. Hang on a second. Lost my train of thought there. So that's another type of partnership that's pretty common.
Okay. Given your extensive interaction with a lot of people and groups, we imagine that you must have experienced some funny or embarrassing moments or something like that. Could you share an interesting story with us?
Embarrassing moment.
Or funny. You can choose one.
Wow, that's got to think about that for a second. Well, I'll tell you, this is pretty embarrassing, but it's not necessarily have to do with any group. But this is probably one of the most embarrassing things I've done, and I did this just recently. Kansas City was just playing a game where temperature. They were playing Miami in the first round of the playoffs, and it was like
From the season?
Excuse me?
From the season or old one?
No, it was the first round of the playoffs this year.
Okay.
In Kansas City, the temperature was supposed to be like 3 degrees, and there was I got wind of the weather early, and so I got down. I had a decent bet under like 44.5 on the game. And so it was a Saturday, and I'm working. I'm real busy with college basketball, and I had the TV on NFL Network, and they were doing the pregame stuff, and I'm listening to that. And then the game starts, and Kansas City goes right down the field and scores a touchdown, goes up 7-0, 14-0. Then they're up 21-0 at halftime. Miami comes back, scores a touchdown, 21-7. Score another touchdown. Now it's 21-14. I'm looking at so I go. Now I'm kind of done. I'm sitting on the couch. I'm watching the game. And I'm on the phone with somebody, and I got the game on, and they're down to Miami's driving again. And they're down to inside the 20-yard line. And if they score the touchdown, then it's going to go into overtime, and then the field goal, it's going to fall 45 and they're going to lose. So they go to they miss the extra, or it's 4th down, and they go to a commercial. It's like 4th and 10 at the like 18-yard line. They go to a commercial, and I'm talking on the phone. The next thing I know, they're doing the post-game show. I didn't even see what happened in the last play. And I said, what happened in the last play? I said, Miami was 4th and 10. I didn't see what happened. And he says, what are you talking about? I said, Miami. It was 21-14. It was 4th and 10. He says, what are you talking about? Miami plays tonight. I said, you're right. They are supposed to play tonight. Well, what the hell was I watching? So Miami played Kansas City earlier in the season in London and won. And Kansas City won 21-14. And NFL Network was showing the replay of that game. Okay? So that's what I was watching. So I'm sweating this under 44.5 out all day watching the wrong game. And I'm looking at the game, and, I said to myself, gosh, it doesn't look that cold there. Like, not even thinking. Like, it doesn't look that cold there. And then there were a few times, like, where the play would end, and then all of a sudden they were, like, right up in the huddle again. I said, wow, that was fast, because on those replays, they cut time out to move it along. Like, halftime, I remember when it was halftime, that was when I got up out of my chair to go sit on the couch, and I was like, seemed like it was 5 minutes later, the third quarter was starting. I was like, wow, that halftime went fast. And like none of this was registering. Meanwhile, the game I really wanted to watch was the Houston Cleveland game. And to embarrass myself even more, while I'm watching the Kansas City game, in the bottom corner of the screen, they're showing live updates of the score of the Houston Cleveland game. But Houston and Cleveland had played several weeks before. And for some reason in my head, I'm saying, why are they showing me updates of a game that was played 3 weeks ago? That's what I'm saying in my head. And I'm like, so anyway, I had a Kansas City. Then the game started later that night. I had to go root the under in all over again. I had to win that bet twice. But anyway, that's about the most challenging thing I can think of that I've done in recent times.
And NFL game, it's a long game, right? So
Yes.
you lost a lot of times.
That's 2.5 hours. I watched that whole replay.
But
Didn't even figure it out.
what was the result from tonight game?
It's supposed to be -3 degrees. The sun's out. People aren't wearing jackets. Nobody looks like they're freezing. Like totally just. All I said was, "Gee, it doesn't look that cold there."
Everything was pointing to you, and you don't realize.
I had enough signals, and I just couldn't figure it out. So
one friend of mine, once time, really, they did this. He was watching a football game, soccer game, was Borussia against Bayer, and he was talking WhatsApp with us, talking about this game. Oh, Borussia just make a score, and everyone looked to him and, whoa, Borussia is not playing against Bayer today. What game are you watching? And when you see, it was a game played 2 weeks before, and was a same situation, It's really
they almost got me again the next day, but I was, by the way, they were doing a replay again the next day, but I was on to them now. They can't get me on that again.
Not twice, right? So Steven, you are one of the individuals who advocates for the concept of CLV. In your opinion, how important is this concept, and how does it differ across various markets and sports? In your opinion?
Well, it's everything. I did a study on that on Twitter last year to try and kind of demonstrate it. And what I did last year was I took 20 college games in football every Saturday for 10 weeks at random. So that was a sample size of 200. And they were picked. I used a random generator to select the games. And on each game selected, so you would assume that picking the games that way, they would go basically 10-10 or each week, but they should be basically 500. And what I did was I took those games, whichever game the random number generator picked, but I assigned a point spread of 1 point better than whatever the circa closing line was to see what kind of a difference it would make. And I don't have the final results with me, but the number of times that the game fell, where the points came into play, that extra point was enough to make it from a losing proposition to a winning proposition, which is roughly about 5%. You only need about 5% of the games for the number to matter. In other words, if you're 10-10 and it matters in 1 out of 20 games, that could make you go from 10-10 to 11-9. 11-9 is a winning proposition. To make you go to 10-9-1, that's still a small profit. So that was basically what I was trying to trying to illustrate with I called it the CLV challenge, and I posted that every week for 10 weeks last year. The other thing is the reason, most people, when they handicap, they'll make a spread. And then if the spread is, if they make the game 6 and the spread's like 4, everybody has their range, how many points off it has to be. But if they make it 6 and the game's 4, then they would like to lay the 4. If they make it 6 and it's 8, they probably like the +8. Unless they have a wider range that they're going by. So when a game's ready to start, that means that everybody in the world has bet into that number. Every piece of information known to man as of post time is bet into that number. So the theory is that the closing line is the sharpest line out there. Like if you were going to make a handicapping line, whatever the closing line is, would probably be your best line to have made to handicap off of. So now the question is, anytime you make a bet where you beat that closing line, that's where your edge comes in. It's similar to as if you made that line and then we're betting off of that line. So when you strive to beat the closing line, you do it, we call that closing line value, because in the long run, that's going to make the difference between winning and losing over volume of bets. Now, if you're a $10 bettor and you don't, you maybe bet 5 or 10 games a week, CLV, having it or not having it, is not going to make or break you. But if you're betting, like on a college basketball Saturday, for example, 50 different bets or 60 or 70 different bets. Now you're talking about that that's going to make a difference over time. I mean, I'll just give you an example on volume. Now, I'm a little bit of a dinosaur when it comes to old school, like charting and keeping track of stuff. And I'm a one-man show over here, so I don't have the whole office staff where I can bet and they'll put it in a computer for me. So I have to I still do everything by hand. I have a spreadsheet where I'll keep my balances and stuff. But to actually make bets, I use a system of 3x5 cards. And I basically write one bet on each 3x5 card when I make a bet. And I'll put the place I bet and the bet and the amount. And then
that is an app?
No, it's an actual 3x5 card. Like there. 3x5 card.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'll take, in other words, let's say if I bet with Circa, I write Circa, Pittsburgh -2, 1,000, let's say.
Okay.
And maybe I might bet Pittsburgh -2 with like 3 other places. So I'll have 3 other cards that all say Pittsburgh -2. I'll have them all together, and then I'll put a different colored card, a chart card on top of that, so that totals it up so I know how much I have. But each white card constitutes one bet. So I'm just going to give you an example. This thick stack of 3x5 cards is all the bets I made on. That's all the bets I made on Saturday.
Oh my God! How many do you have here?
Well, let's see. If you take an empty, let's see. If you take an unused pack of 3x5 cards, Here's 3. So that's over 3. That's over 300 cards. It's got to be.
Oh my
Now
god.
the colored cards are chart cards where the yellow ones tell me the total amount I have on each game, and then summarize, and then the pink ones are the ones where maybe I shared a bet with somebody. So that's how I keep track of that. Anyway, so that's, when you have that kind of a volume, CLV is gonna matter.
I have 2 questions for you about it involves CLV too. The first one, we have some batters all around the world that they say that CLV don't work for tennis, for example. Do you think it
Doesn't work for what?
for tennis? It's I
For
don't know.
tennis.
Yes, it's challengers and grand slams and things like that. What do you think about it? Not on tennis, I mean. It's on other markets and sports. I mean, it's the CLV is important for over, for props, for spreading, for money lines, everything. In your opinion?
Well, first of all, one of the problems that you have to be careful of when you're trying to use the CLV for a sport like tennis is how wide of a juice line are you playing into? So first of all, let's say you're just talking about a big money line, where maybe it might be like minus 600, take back 400. Well, minus 600, take back 400, that doesn't mean necessarily if you see minus 550 that's really a good player. If you see plus 450, that's not necessarily a good play because there's such a wide range there. So you have to be careful with your CLV there. I would say as a general rule, if there's a general consensus line and somebody has a line that's scalpable. So let's say if you have 600 minus 600, take 400 for most of the market, maybe, and then you have one guy might be plus 600. Well, in that case, I would say you got CLV there for the plus 600 because it's almost a scalpable point, the number. But when you have minus 550 and other places have minus 600, that's not necessarily, because that's all just a big juice factor you're betting into. Now on the other props, if you've got a regular 20-cent line on the props, so everything's basically starts out at $1.10, $1.10, and it could move to $1.20 even, or $1.30 plus $1.10, or $1.40 plus $1.20. If you're working off of the regular 20-cent line, and you've got the same spread, and you're basically going to pick up 20 cents off of that, that's probably worth, there's probably some value to that. In other words, especially on props like that, and let's say whatever the prop is, let's say a team's in tennis is minus 1.5 games, minus $1.40, take back 20, and you've got a guy that's dealing minus 1.5, minus 20. Chances are that the minus 1.5, minus 20 is not only a good, not only has CLV, but it also probably has CLV because in general, they probably didn't open at minus 1.5, minus 40. It probably got there because somebody bet it. And it's not, the guy who bet it that drove it up to minus 1.5, minus 40 usually isn't the guy that's sitting there making $20, $10 tennis bets. It's usually a group or syndicate that did their handicap, and they went out and they said, all right, lay minus 1.5 wherever you can go on this game. And they drove it up everywhere. So a lot of times on those niche sports, on spreads and stuff like that, if the number has moved and you can beat the line of what the current general market is. Generally, you're basically piggybacking off of the handicap of somebody who drove it up to that number, which is probably a winning proposition.
It's okay. And the other question I want to know about you, there are many of players that put them plays on live games, you know. What do you think? Because on live games you don't have the close line value, right? Because it's already started. What do you think about this kind of methodology? I don't know if that's right to pronunciate it.
I don't do very much with live games, but what I will tell you is when let's say a team is an 8-point favorite, and now they're losing, maybe the game's tied, or maybe they're down a point outright, and now in progress the line is they're only a 4-point favorite. Okay, and maybe you're like in the third quarter or something like that. There's no value to betting the -4, saying, well, the game closed 8, so I'm going to lay 4, because you're laying 4 when the team's down 1. So that's kind of factored in there. Now, what I will say, and this is my opinion, and modelers will disagree with me on this. One that I respect a lot disagrees with me, but I just told him he's out of his mind. But take a situation, and this is really for basketball, but in basketball, in the first couple minutes of the game, if you can, like, let's say you were going to bet a game -7 in college basketball, and you got shut out, and the game just started, and now the other team goes down and scores the first basket, and they're losing 2-0, and now the in progress line is -6, and you're 30 seconds to a minute into the game. I don't see any harm in laying the 6 there, saying like you're laying 6 when the game closed 7, because it's a basketball game. It's one basket. I don't see how the opening basket of the game can have that big an effect on the line right then and there. And that's my opinion, but it's got to be very early in the game. Like, we're talking the first few minutes. The further you get into the game, the more significant that in progress line is. But in my opinion, right at the outset in a basketball game, I don't think that the in progress line can be that sharp, because it's basketball. There was a game the other day. The team started out 19-0, and then they were losing by 8 later in the game, and then they ended up coming back and winning the game anyway. So there's huge fluctuations in basketball. So the fluctuation in the first minute or two of a game, I think I don't have an issue with trying to take advantage of that. If you were trying to bet the game and you missed it, and maybe trying to grab something in progress right out of the gate. But I wouldn't wait too long. Once you get to a certain point, then you're really dealing with, that line is much more accurate. Now, my friend, who I respect, who's a big model guy, numbers guy, he's worked on that modeling, and if the other team goes up 2-0 and the line changes, he says that's right, that's what it should be. Now, I've watched enough basketball that I disagree, but that's my opinion. There's no mathematical basis for that, so I'll quantify it and put it that way. But those are the only times I'll really go in progress. Every now and then, if I'm watching a football game, a team takes the lead that probably shouldn't take the lead. It was just off of a freak play or something like that, and it's early in the game. I may bet the other side back, because they really haven't establish themselves as any kind of an offensive threat in the game. They just got a lucky play, a turnover, or whatever. So the other team may still have that there may still be value in that, and it's early in the game. So, but yeah, I would say early in the game, you can maybe play a little bit around with off the opening number, but very early in the games. After that, then you have to go strictly based on the situation at the time. Like, I'll give you an example. When Cincinnati played on Thursday Night Football, the game that Burrow got hurt, I forget who they were playing. I think maybe Buffalo or something like that. But the second Burrow got hurt, a shot of him on the sideline trying to throw the ball, and he just, like, he couldn't even move, couldn't even lift his arm. And if you were paying attention to that, you had a shot that against Cincinnati in progress, like lay 2.5 on the game or something like that. And it eventually went right to like 4.5 or 5. And like there was a real quick window. But that's a case of you're paying attention to what's going on and you're watching a game. So really, if you're betting in progress, you should be totally on top of the game situation, and make your decisions based on what's actually going on in the game. If you're trying to, beat the original number very early in the game, you can probably get away with it. After that, you're not really getting what you think you're getting.
I guess I agree with you that on live betting there are some opportunities. I mean, if you base it on the close line, in fact, I guess on basketball mainly, you can have some advantage too. But I don't. It's only my opinion, as you said. I don't have any numbers to confirm or not confirm this.
And Steven, we are going to the end of our podcast, and I want you to show some advice for beginner bettors, beginners groups who wants to increase your models, increase your profit and stuff like that. What do you say for this kind of people?
First of all, don't quit your day job. I always give out this piece of advice for betting NFL. If you do nothing else when betting the NFL, if you restrict yourself from ever laying 3.5, laying 7.5, taking 6.5, or taking 2.5, and at the end of the season, you'll be slightly better than you would if you bet those numbers. And that's just my NFL theory on those numbers. I mean, the other thing you want to do is you want to be, you have to make a decision. Are you doing this just to keep yourself entertained and bet because the game's on TV? Are you doing this because you want to try and make a living at it, or you don't want to make a living at it, but you definitely want to win and not treat it as entertainment? So you have to make those, come to that decision on your own. And if your decision is that, you want to try to make money with it, whether it be as a career or just as a casual hobby, then you need to put the time in to, to either, find a way to handicap or try stuff that works, possibly network. I mean, I don't know if you guys make it to Bet Bash. Are you guys familiar with Bet Bash?
Yes, we heard about it. We don't.
We never got there, but
yeah.
we know the event.
I mean, I will be there, and I certainly recommend it for anybody that's interested in upping their game. I mean, you'll have all the sharp guys you could ever want to meet or talk to in the same venue for 4 days. They're all friendly. They're all willing to talk shop. There's a networking function where you can meet people with your own particular interests, and maybe you can make a connection with them to, trade information or maybe work with them or something like that. And well worth the trip. I mean, if you just the amount of the free open bars and the watch parties and stuff like that, pretty much you've got your money value out of it. And then between the seminars, the classes, the panels, and the people you'll get to socialize with, that's just like, it can't hurt your bottom line. It can only help you. So I'd recommend it as a place to go, place to be, if you're trying to up your game in any way and gain some more information and stuff like that. This year, there's going to be a lot of, in addition to the panels, there's going to be a lot of actual classes around specific topics that, for handicap in certain sports, for gambling in the law, betting partnerships. I mean, all kinds. There's going to be like 20 or more different classes that you can sit in on, that'll really answer a lot of your questions and help you with other things, plus all the people that you'll get to meet in the networking event and stuff like that.
Nice, Steven. Really, I think was really insightful. And I want to ask you if you have anything to share with us. And I think we don't ask you, because I think it was a really good conversation, and I'm sure that everyone will like this episode.
Anything else I would like to share?
The hard question, right?
Oh, we got through the whole interview without the dogs barking, so that was a plus.
Good.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything new, but for those of you that may have a question for me, my Twitter handle is @real_fats, and REAL_FATS, and my DMs are always open, and anybody that asks me a question, I try to answer all my DMs and respond to everybody as best I can. So if there's anything that maybe you wanted to ask me that didn't get asked here or didn't get addressed, feel free to send me a DM, and I will get back to you.
Good, really good.
Então, pessoal, esse foi o nosso 13º episódio aqui com o Steven. Foi um prazer recebê-lo aqui. Espero que vocês tenham gostado também. E aí, Luquinha, o que você achou?
Mais uma vez, mais um ótimo episódio, né? Eu acho que a gente nunca errou, né? Trazer um convidado aqui. Acho que foi bem legal mais uma vez. Então, só agradecer ao Steven por ter aceitado o nosso convite e mais uma vez falar com vocês sobre a BetBra. Caso tenha interesse aí, nossos links estão aqui embaixo e também no QR Code que está aqui na tela. Fechou, galera? So, Steven, say goodbye for public, and one more time, thank you for accepting our invite.
Well, goodbye, everybody. Maybe I'll see you on Twitter, and I hope anything I told you was helpful to you, and good luck to you all in the future.
Thanks. Bye-bye.